Deborah, your book, Secondhand Rose, came out in May this year. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about it?
Okay, it's about a young girl called Abigail Hurst and her trusty terrier Jake. They move back to her hometown of Friendship because unfortunately her grandma dies. Her grandma's called Rose, and her grandma owns a antique shop called Secondhand Rose. Abigail inherits the house and the shop. Unfortunately, this town's got a really dark secret, and Abigail starts to realise that this town on the surface looks perfect, but it's really, really not. And there's a lot of gruesome deaths and a lot of sinister goings on that happen when she moves back into the town.
And how gruesome are we talking here? Are we talking target audience 18 plus?
Have had one of my friends, her little girl's 15 and she's read it, and she was fine. She likes horror, read horror before. So yeah, it is gruesome. It is a horror, but I suppose if you like horror, then it's not going to be too shocking. My partner was about 10-year-old when he started watching horror films and reading horror books, so he's quite immune to it.
And when did this idea come up? When did you decide, you know what, I'm going to write a horror book?
My dog passed away in February 2019, and unfortunately I didn't cope very well with this passing. I became very anxious, very low, and had too much time on my hands. So I decided to fill that time. I needed to do something productive. So I decided that I would put my efforts into writing a book, and he's the dog that is in the book.
But did you have the story in your mind for many years before, or was that something that you developed then?
No, it just came into my head. I knew the ending. I knew the ending 100%, and then I just filled in the bits in between. So it wasn't something that I'd ever dreamt of being. It wasn't something that I thought I'm going to be an author from being a child. It just circumstance and being too much time on my hands that I decided that I needed to do something, and this took me away. It helped me grieve, definitely, because a lot of the things that he does in the book are the things that he actually did. It's his quirks, so it definitely helped me through what was quite a difficult time.
You said you didn't dream about becoming an author as a child. What kind of relationship did you have with books and with reading when you were younger?
I loved books. I loved old books. My earliest memory is my mum reading Winnie the Pooh. It's still my favourite book now. Any moment I get, I read Winnie the Pooh. I loved the old classics, so things like Robinson Crusoe, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Kidnapped. They're the books that I read over and over and over to the point where my mum was ripping her hair out.
But you were only reading them. You didn't aspire to write your own version of those.
No, not at all. I wouldn't class myself as the smartest of people to write a book in the first place. Never did very well at school. I was bullied all through my school years, so I left with no qualifications, never to aspire to do anything to do with writing at all. But it just happened. I just had this idea of this story, and it just evolved from there.
What was life like for you in general before you started writing?
I work in a warehouse. I work in the returns department. I open boxes for a living and decide whether the products are faulty and need to go back to the supplier, or whether they can be put back on the shelf to be resold. So I've done that job since 1998 for the same company, so I've been there an awful long time. I dance. I dance 2 or 3 times a week. I go to the cinema every week. Love going to the movies. So we were quite a busy pair, along with the dog. And then, like I say, things changed when you've not got a dog to walk or spend time with. It sort of gives you too much time on your hands. You have to find something else to do.
What kind of dance did you participate in?
So I did ballet, tap dancing, a lot of modern and jazz, but now I do dance classes, cardio, very intense classes with the most amazing instructor. So I do that now. So I've evolved a bit. I can't do the dancing I used to do when I was a kid. I've moved on to probably harder work so that I can keep fit and also keep my brain fit, because you have to remember the dancers.
Oh yeah. So that's a lot of contemporary, powerful music then.
Yeah, it's a lot of modern stuff that is very powerful, bass orientated, so that you've got this bass to dance to. And the instructor is awesome. I come out of that class feeling like I could run a marathon if I had the energy. It's just so much fun, and it's definitely something that keeps your brain active as well as your body. So it's best of both worlds.
Did you ever run a marathon?
No. I can dance forever, but I don't think I could run anywhere.
When you started writing your book, how much planning did you do before you started to actually write it?
I wrote an awful lot about the characters. I knew that the town had to be called Friendship because it just sounds so perfect. Everybody wants to live in a town called Friendship. It's just beautiful. I knew that obviously Jake had to be in it, and Jake had to be a big part of the story, and his relationship with Abigail had to be like mine and Jake's, where we relied on each other. And that probably sounds daft when it's a dog, but he knew when I was sad, he knew when I was happy, and I wanted the same kind of feeling with Abigail in the story. I knew that the town had to have shops and houses at either side of the street, and mountains at one end and a stream at the other. I had this image of this perfect town. And then I just wrote in the characters. So the guy that owns the bar, the lady that owns the B&B, and then the sheriff and the people that work for him. And then I just wrote it all down in a notebook and filled in the blanks.
But were you aware of the plot from beginning to end before you started to actually write the scenes?
I think that came as I went along, because the first murder, I wrote that my partner was cutting the grass. He came in, read it, and said it wasn't gruesome enough, that I had to try harder. So I had to delete it and start again.
And then you talked for days about how to gruesomely murder somebody.
Yeah, which is kept in the house rather than outside in the street. But yeah, he reads an awful lot of Stephen King, and he said that that's not gruesome enough. You need to think about it. So I sat back in the front room and rewrote it.
Let's talk about the dog a little bit more. You wrote your dog into the book, but what kind of role does the dog really have? Because, the dog can't talk, he can only do a very limited number of things. So how difficult was it to find a place that works narratively?
It's hard for me to say that because that's a major plot twist. So I can't really give too much away. But he's there for support and he's there when things happen that Abigail is not aware of, but Jake senses that there's somebody there or there's something about to happen. But yeah, it's hard for me to give too much away because there's some major plot twists with Jake.
Okay.
So you don't want to give too much away.
But maybe then just the part before the plot point. I would assume that's a substantial part of the book.
Yes, it is. It's not only horror, but there's a mystery as well in it. So there's a lot of twists and turns and things that you don't see coming. And I'm a big fan of M. Night, so I wanted to do a book where you think you figured it out, you think you know where it's going, and then something happens and you think, I've not figured that out. I didn't see that coming.
But the dog, is the dog more of a Lassie kind of dog that maybe ends up driving a tractor somewhere, or is it more the shoulder to cry on?
No, he's not that smart. He's just there as a companion. But that would be funny. Maybe I can put that in the next book.
Well, there you go. You're welcome.
I can put a note in the back saying that you gave me that.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to write the first draft of it?
So I started in the February, just after he passed away, and I'd finished by sort of May, June time. It just happened. As soon as I started typing away, this story just came out of me. And I sent it to a friend who reads a stupid amount of books. And she gave me a lot of pointers, sent me a huge email back saying, I don't understand this. What about this? What about dates? Time frame? And gave me loads and loads of pointers. So I went back and used all the things that she'd given me, all these pointers, and sort of adapted it. So that was probably September, I think, by the time I'd done everything that she'd sent me, and we'd read through it a few times.
And was she your only editor?
Yes, because I was never going to publish it. I decided that I was going to print it all off, get my friend to draw a book cover, and I was going to give it to my mum as a Christmas present. So that was the end goal, that it was just going to be some pieces of paper that we printed off at the computer. My friend drew the front cover, we put them together in a binder, and I wrapped it up for my mum. And that's it. That's as far as that went 4 years ago. So there was never any intention of me publishing this book. It was just something that helped me therapy-wise, and it meant I could give my mum something a bit different for Christmas.
What's changed that you ended up deciding to publish it?
I was 50 in June, and I decided that I was going to see if it was any good, and see if somebody would give me some feedback, if it needed adapting, if there's something that I could do better. Just for me, just to see if it was any good. Because all these friends and family have told me that it's good, but they're their friends and family, they love you, so they're going to say it's good. You know, they're not going to say it's rubbish, because they're family, aren't they?
Yeah.
So we went through the top 100 publishers just after the new year. and a lot of the publishers weren't taking books on. A lot of them didn't like the genre, didn't like the fact that it's a short story. And then we found Blossom Spring, sent it to them. They sent an email saying that if after 2 or 3 weeks I've not heard anything, then it wasn't successful. But then they sent me an email 3 weeks later, which is literally the best email I've ever had, saying that they loved it. They thought it was original. They loved the relationship between Abigail and Jake, and they thought that it could be a series of books. They loved the characters that much. I was absolutely blown away. Couldn't believe that I got that kind of response for this daft short story that I wrote to help me grieve. It was amazing.
Maybe let's go just one step back for a moment. You said it's a very short book. I think it's about 100 pages, right?
Yes.
Did you ever think about maybe making sure that it's longer, or did you feel like there's just not more story than the 100 pages?
I think now I've got a bit more confidence, and the new book that I'm doing now is a lot more descriptive. I never had that confidence when I did Secondhand Rose. Like I say, I just wrote it to help me. But I think now if I wrote Secondhand Rose now, it would be a lot different, a lot more in depth, a lot more descriptive, and it would be a longer book. But I suppose that just comes with time and probably confidence.
And Blossom Spring, they didn't mind that it was short either, right?
No, not at all. They just said that they'd possibly see a series in it. They wanted more. When they finished reading it, they felt like I should have more, which is a nice compliment, rather than somebody saying, "Oh, I've got that finished. I don't want to read any more of that." So I think that was the confidence that I needed to write some more of it, to write more about those two characters.
I tried to do a little bit of research about Blossom Spring because I've never heard of them, and there seems to be just a little bit of a controversy about whether or not Blossom Spring is a vanity press or not.
Well, my partner did a lot of research after they sent me a proposal for a contract, because we wanted to make sure that we were doing the right thing. So we did an awful lot of research about them and whether people had bad reviews, and they've been absolutely amazing. That I can't praise them enough. They've just been amazing with me, supporting me all the way, giving me book bloggers to contact and interviews, and just generally helping me make the right decisions when I'm trying to get my book reviewed and promoted. So we've had no issues with them at all, from the day that they offered me the contract to right up to today. So if people have had a bad experience, it's not something that I've had at all.
So you would say that from your experience, definitely, it's a somewhat legit publisher that's not just taking your money and then sending you 1,000 books for you to do whatever with.
No, not at all. I've, like I say, it's just been a fabulous experience. We keep saying that we're on this ride, me and my partner, and we just don't want it to stop at the moment. We're enjoying every minute of it. So there's nothing bad I can say about Blossom Spring at all.
I also saw that on their website I think they have like two different kind of offers that they make the authors. The one is the general traditional publisher route, and then the other one is, I think they call it Program B or something like that.
Yeah, the Appendix A and Appendix B, I think it's.
Yeah. Which would be
Yeah,
the one that would seem a little bit more sketchy, where you have to pay them first and then they end up making the book for you.
yes, which is what we did. We paid them the money, and then they sent the book to an editor that works for Blossom. And then she sent an email with all these edits, which was horrendous. There was about 300 edits, and I literally had a meltdown because I thought they wanted me to rewrite my book. They don't like it, and my partner's trying to calm me down because it was so scary to see all these things that were wrong with it. This book that you're just so in love with, and so proud of, and then you see all these red marks. I felt like a kid again at school.
Did
And I've
you
just made a complete hash of it.
did you generally agree with the criticism you got?
Yeah, I think once I calmed down, and once I actually put my book head on rather than my panic head, you realised that they were 100% right. Because I know this book in my head 100%. I know it off by heart, but somebody else reading it doesn't. And it took me a while to get my head around that I needed to explain more, because there were bits in the book where the editor just said, I don't get it. I don't understand what you're trying to get across. So I needed to explain a lot more, and to remember that not everybody is in my head. The person reading this book's thinking, what? So yeah, it did make sense once we started going through it, but it took 4 days to go through the edits. And we were going on holiday. So we literally had 4 days to blitz all these edits before we went away. So it was late nights and a lot of writing and changes and explaining, which needed to be done. But when I first saw them, I literally went into a meltdown.
What were most of the edits about? Were there situations that didn't make sense, or, as you said, dates that were maybe missing or that didn't make sense?
There was a lot of spelling mistakes, where I just got the wrong version of a word. Like I say, I haven't got any schooling at all, really. So I didn't know that I'd made so many spelling mistakes. And me and my partner had edited it. Can't imagine how many times we'd read it. We were starting to go mad reading this book over and over and over. And we just missed them. And there were a lot of times when she was saying, how does Abigail feel at this point? Because I'd not put how she was actually feeling in different situations. So that was a lot of edits. And then, like you say, dates. And also, it's a half an hour walk from where she lives back to Second-Hand Rose. But sometimes I'd put an hour and sometimes I'd put half an hour. So those kind of things just needed polishing. It was a lot of polishing, which once you got into that, I realised that they were doing the right thing. It just very daunting when you first see it.
Yeah, of course. Did you, after you've finished your manuscript, did you ever think about maybe going the self-publishing route?
I think that would have been the second option if we hadn't have got what we got from Blossom Spring. I think both of us did an awful lot of research. And like I say, we went through 100 publishers, finding the one that would take a short story, would take a horror, and were actually taking books, because a lot of them only have a short window where they actually take on new books. To I think it took the whole of January just hunting for somebody that would do it. So if I'd have got nothing back, then that would have been the next option. But they did everything. The covers, the cover is literally from my head. When I explained to the girl what I wanted, when it came back, it was just, you're in my head. How did you know? From me explaining that that's exactly what I wanted. It was just perfect that they did this cover. That I've had so many comments on the cover that it just looks so sinister. It's exactly what I wanted.
For the listeners who can't see the cover right now, it's a what is it? A wardrobe in the middle
Yes,
of a big room
yes,
with floral print wallpaper.
roses. Yeah,
Yeah. And then out of the wardrobe is coming it seems like a big hand.
it's a very big hand.
So I would assume that's not the dog.
No. Oh, you're giving me so much information ready for my next book. I'm going to have to put you as a co-writer, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, that's not the dog. That's
And
something a lot sinister.
that probably has a little bit to do with the twist of the story then.
Yes, yes. But the cover's amazing. I love the cover.
How did you write that from a logistical point of view? Did you have your writing setup, your little nook in one of your rooms where you sit down between 7 and 8 p.m. every day to write 1,000 words, or what was your schedule like?
Well, I work 7 in the morning till 5 at night, Monday to Friday. So writing is in between tea, dancing, chores. So I never really have a set time because I don't like to put pressure on myself to try and sit and write, because then it goes out the window because other things happen. But I am probably the only person that's ever going to tell you this, but I write in the front room and I put Murder, She Wrote on, and I write to Jessica Fletcher in the background. And that's how I've always done it. And she's my inspiration. But I find listening to her quite calming and quite soothing. And I like the background noise. I don't think I could write. I've done it that long that I don't think I could write in a quiet room. So my partner sits at the side of me, probably watching football on his tablet or something with the sound off. And I sit listening to Jessica Fletcher and I just type. I just write, and I don't give myself set words. I don't give myself any goals. I just write until I feel like I'm ready to just say, right, do you want to read it? And then he reads it as soon as I've finished.
Do you have any other kind of guidance for you while you're writing? Because some of the other authors I spoke to, for example, they have a routine where they make sure that they end the day writing at the point where they know exactly how to start writing the next paragraph, so that the next day they already know how to start and what to write, and are never in a situation where they're sitting in front of a blank page and panic and don't know what to do. Do you have some kind of rules like that too?
Yeah, I tried to finish chapter. I'm writing quite an in-depth chapter at the moment, which has now taken me about 3 or 4 days to do this one chapter, because I keep thinking of other things and popping them in, and then I get inspiration from things outside. So I'm about halfway through this chapter 7. So I do like to finish, like you say, on a point where I know that I can pick it back up. I don't like to finish halfway through. But I also because this chapter's been quite in depth, it's quite a pivotal point of the story. So I really want to get it right. So I keep going back to it. Friday morning, I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and just had this thought. So literally got up and started writing. And then when my partner got up at 7, I'd done a big chunk of this chapter and rewrote a bit more. So I think when the inspiration comes, rather than laying there awake thinking, I'll write that when I get up, I just get up, I just do it. And then at least it's out of my head, and then we can spend the rest of the day doing whatever we need to do.
Talking about the length of your book again, it's 100 pages. It's very interesting length because it's not full length. We're not talking about 300 or 400 pages, but it's also with 100 pages a little bit longer than I would a short story expect to be.
Yes.
Did you at some point think about maybe just cutting it down to maybe like something like 30 pages or so to just have a, let's say, proper short story format?
We didn't know all this until we started researching in the new year that it's classed as a novello, and we'd never heard that word, either of us. So no, I think, like I say, because I'd never thought about getting it published. It wasn't until we looked into this and researched that we found that it was slightly longer than a short story.
But
also,
at that point, you could have said, well, in order to increase my chances, I'm gonna either make this way longer or make this a bit shorter.
No, it never came into my head. I just love the story that much, and I suppose every writer says that, don't they? They love their story, so they're gonna say those things. But I think that because it all flows, and I've had comments from people saying a lot happens at once, that there's no gradual, and I suppose that's because it's a short story, and also because I didn't actually know what I was doing. I just had this story in my head and just got it down onto my tablet. I'd never written anything before, probably at school when I was a kid, but never as an adult. So it just happened, and I didn't even think about how long it was or how short it was or whether it needed to be a proper novel. I just wrote it, and then, like I say, in January we sent it to one publisher and they loved it. So the feedback was there.
I think you already said that you're planning to make the next one a bit longer.
Yes.
So are you aiming for let's say, for a traditional length of something like 300 or 400 pages or even more?
I'm hoping so. The story that I've got in my head is a lot longer than Secondhand Rose, a lot more in depth. I'm thinking about the way I'm describing things, and I suppose that just comes with time and realising when the edits came back for Secondhand Rose how much information they actually need, because it's hard when it's in your head to get it on the page and describe it so that people read it and they say, I can see that room. So that's what I'm going for now. I'm trying to be more descriptive, and I've wrote 10 chapters already, and I think it's about 10,000 words. So there's a lot more in this one because there's a lot more going on. And it spans not just in one town, it's across the world this time. So there's a lot more places I can go because I've not narrowed my options to one town. It's worldwide, which is a lot of scope, isn't it?
But you haven't done a outline beforehand for this one.
No, it's all in my head, which I don't know whether that's right or wrong, because I don't know many other authors. But the whole story is in my head, and I'll see something in the street and think, oh, that would be funny in this book. oh, I can do that with the book, or somebody will say something and I think, oh, I can twist that and I can put that in the book. So that's how this has happened, is that a lot of things that I'm seeing just suddenly give me inspiration. We came home from work a few weeks ago and we stopped at a pedestrian crossing, and I suddenly had this image in my head of this part of the book, this part of this chapter. And I said it to my partner and he just laughed in the car and just said, that is so funny, you've got to put that in. And where did that come from? And I said, just looking at the pedestrian crossing, I just had this thought. So that's already gone in. So I'm just getting inspiration from all over rather than writing it down, just see where it goes.
But are you opposed to outlining?
No, not at all. I think I just like the freedom of it. I've written the ending. The ending is written down in my notebook. I've still got all the notes from Secondhand Rose, so I've carried on. So I've wrote the ending, and I've wrote a few names of characters, and there's a lot of colleagues that I work with and also friends that I've asked if I can use them in the book. So I already know where the story's going, and I suppose I should write it down, but I just like I like to know that it could change rather than it's written down, that I could tweak that because I'm not 100% happy with it. So I'd like to just go along with it and just see where it takes me.
What are your aspirations for the second book? As I said, the first book you did that you wrote that down to cope really with loss. But what is your goal for your second book then?
I think the confidence of the first one has led me to this, to know that what I've written isn't rubbish, or not to Blossom Spring anyway. And that's what's given me the inspiration to write this one. This story I actually started after Secondhand Rose, so probably Christmas 2019, and then stopped, never carried on with it. I'd done about 4 chapters, and then because Blossom Spring said they wanted to publish Secondhand Rose, it's given me that push to carry on to write it, that maybe I could write a second one, and just see where it goes. But I have there's no thoughts in my head about I need to do this for money or anything like that. It's just I'm enjoying it. It's just I have so much fun when I'm writing, that I just get these stories, these daft stories in my head. And I've probably had them all my life, but probably ignored them. And then this has given me that push to do something with it.
So you would definitely say that the whole writing thing for you is much more of a hobby than really the attempt to make at least somewhat of a living off that.
Yeah, I don't know whether it will ever lead to a living. Like I say, I work full time, and I love my job. I love working in the warehouse. So this is more fun, and because I enjoy it so much, then I suppose I can just go with it, rather than people who do this for a living. Mine's just in between my full-time job and my full-time life, and we'll just see where it goes. Myself and my partner have always said that it was never about money. It was just about saying, I'm 50-year-old and I've had a book published. And that's a huge thing for somebody who's got no schooling, no qualifications, and works in a warehouse. So I'll see.
And I don't know if you said it already, but the second book, is that considered a sequel of the first one?
No. It's a children's book.
So the idea of your publisher to say, well, we could make a series out of this, is not necessarily that appealing to you, or
It does, yeah. There is thoughts in my head that there should be a sequel. I've already got ideas, but I'm trying to file them in a different part of my brain until I've finished this. But yeah, I've already had ideas of where Abigail and Jake can go next. So it's not ruled out at all. I just need to get this one done, and then we'll see what happens with the sequel. But yeah, I think a lot of people have said that it needs a sequel. So I've got to listen to them, haven't I?
Do you already have a release date or a release window for your second book?
No, I've only done 10 chapters, and I haven't. Blossom Spring know that I've started a second book, but I've not actually told them it's not a sequel. I've not told them anything, if I'm honest. It'd be a nice surprise when I email it over, or not. So yeah, I think if they don't go for it, because there's a chance they might not. They might want a sequel to Secondhand Rose and nothing else. We don't know until we send it over. Then we might go down maybe a different publisher or even self-publish. Because my partner says it's I suppose he's going to say it, isn't he? But he finds it quite funny, quite a funny book. So we'll see what happens when I send it over to them, and see if they are interested in taking it on or whether they decide it's not for them.
So, and you brought us a little passage of Secondhand Rose to read, right?
Yes.
Well, then, ready when you are.
It was early June 2018 when Abigail Hurst packed up all her belongings to make the long journey to Friendship, a journey she had not taken in a while. Grandma had passed away, so it was time to say goodbye. Goodbye to her life in Everett and her job as a reporter at the Herald, and move back to Friendship, to Grandma's beautiful house and antique shop, the Secondhand Rose. By her side was her little terrier Jake, who, despite his size, could handle just about anything. She fastened him securely in the van and started the long journey home. Abigail was 22 years old when she had left home for the big city lights, determined to be a reporter. Gran had never stopped her. She just knew she'd be back when she could. The happy thoughts of Gran kept her going as she travelled, along with Jake's occasional bark at cows. After what seemed like hours, they arrived at Gran's home. Abigail had always loved this house. The trustees of the will had left the key under the flower pot on the porch, so they let themselves in. Grandma Rose's house was colonial, like the houses in New Orleans were. The architect of Friendship had gone to New Orleans on holiday when he was a kid, and the beautiful houses had stayed with him. When he designed Friendship, he had made a mini version. He said then he would always be on holiday. It was the best of both worlds, Rose had always said. The house was old-fashioned with dark furniture everywhere. Abigail had already decided she would sell most of it in the shop. She had also decided that she would keep the Tiffany lamps. She loved them, and the dining table, mostly because when she was little she'd written her name on it, and Grandma had always said it was hers now. None of the table's chairs matched, because Grandma had broken all the original ones over the years and bought replacements from yard sales. Abigail loved the fact they didn't match, but so quirky, so Grandma. There was a veranda round the front of the house, and Abigail was looking forward to a glass of wine with Jake by her side on a warm evening, listening to the crickets. The furniture on the veranda needed updating. She decided it was her first task. It was nearly summer after all. Priorities, Jake, she said, looking down at him. She took the box from the car labelled kettle, grabbed Jake's bits and bobs, and settled in for the night. It was early when she awoke. Jake was still snoring next to her. It had been a long journey, so she decided to leave him where he was and start unpacking. It was such a beautiful day. She unpacked as quickly as possible so she could take Jake and explore the town and visit the antique shop, which was now hers, a fact that still really hadn't sunk in. The town was just as she remembered it. Nothing had changed in the 10 years she'd been away. The streets on either side of a wide road, and the mountains in the distance. It was a cross between Twin Peaks and Boulder from Morecambe Windy. She walked past the sheriff's office, the coffee shop that Martha used to own, the B&B called Friendship Forever that was owned by Sophia Chapman, and the bar owned by Jeff Sampson. She loved this town. It was perfect. Jake had so many new smells and new places to explore. He was happily wagging his tail at everyone who said hello to him. She thought to herself, why did I leave? The antique shop was perfect, and the smell of the furniture brought back so many memories. Happy memories, sad memories. I miss Gran, she said to herself. Being here brought that back. She loved old stuff, and now everything old. She had a lot of in this shop. Some beautiful, some not so beautiful. One particular not so beautiful piece was a big bedroom wardrobe made from really dark, nearly black wood. She'd always hated it, but Grandma said it was special. There were lamps everywhere, but the shop was dark and uninviting. She would change all that. The shop had 2 big bay windows either side of the front door, so she would take the dark furniture out of them and bring a light in. I could do so much with this shop, she said. As she looked around, she wondered where the trustees had left the keys and which one would fit the ugly wardrobe. She'd never seen it open. Well, now she owned it, she would open it. Just as she started hunting, the shop door opened, and there stood Sophia Chapman. Jake wagged his tail and ran over. Sophia looked down at him and said, "Oh." Abigail remembered Sophia was a cat person. She had 10 of the darn creatures 10 years ago. Lord knows how many she had now. Jake didn't understand why he didn't get fussed, and then he smelt cats and ran round the shop trying to find them. Kept him busy while Abigail and Sophia caught up. She talked for an hour or so about the town, Abigail's job at the Herald, and of course Grandma. Then Jake finally came back, probably as he couldn't find any cats, and probably because he was hungry. Abigail said goodbye to Sophia and said that she would pop into the B&B tomorrow, without Jake, which went without saying. She closed the shop and started the half-mile walk home. It was a beautiful evening. Jake didn't mind walking. Abigail had a pocket full of biscuits for him. It was Abigail who was now starving.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's from Secondhand Rose, and it's out now?
Yes, it is. Yeah, 17th of May it was published.
So where can the listeners find Secondhand Rose, and where can the listeners find you online?
So I'm on Twitter, now X, I suppose. Then I'm also on Instagram now, and I'm also on TikTok now. And I've got my Amazon profile set up because that's where you can buy the book. I've also joined All Author, and they're featuring my book for the next 6 months. So you can also get it on there as well.
And what's your handle on Instagram and TikTok? Twitter?
So Twitter is DebMax730 and Instagram is Deborah.9553. And I'm not sure about TikTok.
All right. Thank you very much, Deborah. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
And I wish you all the luck with your next book, whenever it'll come out.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you again for doing this, and thank you again for giving me some of your time.
Oh, you're welcome. I've really enjoyed it.